Hey, Hawkeye fans, Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, and this disheveled post-game podcast after Iowa defeats Illinois 64-58. In the background, you can hear Kim Barnes-Arico talking after Michigan's victory over Oregon. That is Iowa's opponent Saturday in the Big Ten tournament semifinals. Dargan, we got booted from our first podcast spot, which was a little bit of a contentious situation, but we've they give the players their cooling off period. We've had our cooling off period, and now we're ready to bring you guys a little post game chatter after what was. I mean, Iowa show. First of all, I know you're not totally cooled off yet, Dargan, but how are we feeling now? How are we feeling?
It is what it is.
It's been a rough tournament media-wise so far, but you guys don't want to hear about that.
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I know media complaining about media amenities is the last thing anybody wants to hear, but 2 years ago in Minneapolis, when there was about 100,000 times the fans, the media attendance, the interest, when Caitlin Clark's senior year was there, this tournament was run 100 times better than it's been run this year and last year on top of that. So
we're off to a rough start.
Yeah. I guess the end of this night kind of finished like the end of Iowa's night. But,
yeah, Illinois is on a 15-0 run here. Me. Anyway.
But regardless of that, I really didn't find that significant in the game. But
overall, no, we'll talk about it. We will talk about that. But go ahead.
I think it was a great bounce-back performance for Iowa after what was easily their most tense and most dramatic game of the season barely a week ago against Illinois at home. All the things that were problematic on that night, they corrected a lot of it, starting with the three-point defense. I mean, Illinois was 11 for 19 in Iowa City. They go 5 for 22 tonight. That's the second most misses from deep they've had in a game this season. And it was clear early that Iowa's energy was going to be there, and they knew how important it was to come out and really put a team that was playing its third game in 3 days in a position where they were going to play catch-up. And so, credit that. It was a balanced effort all the way around. Pretty much everybody got involved, which was a good night for us because we got our first open locker rooms of the season where we really got to talk to pretty much everybody and had some good chats. So a great start for Iowa down here. Tomorrow's going to be a little tougher, but, everything that pretty much could go right did. Except for the final 3 minutes, which in the grand scheme of things weren't really that significant.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take the first 36 minutes of this game, Jan Jensen cleared her starters at 3:53 of the second half, of the fourth quarter. Iowa was up 64-43 at that point. And that's just a machine-like performance. And when you talk about starting, how do you want to start the postseason? I mean, this was a team that came ready to play from the get-go. Defensive assignments were crisp. Their defensive game. I talked to Sean Sullivan, who had the scout for this game afterward, and they were their post switches were on point with Ava Hayden. Last time, as you recall, they had some trouble with that, and some shooters got loose. This time, nobody was getting downhill. They weren't getting easy buckets, right in that painted area. And he gave credit to Hayden, Stuelke, and Journey Houston for that. Season low, 33% shooting for the Illini. Sure, it's their third game in 3 days, but to me, the defense was right there from the get-go. They scored 3 times on their first 17 possessions. That set the tone for the Hawkeyes, who really kind of got off to a little bit of a slow start offensively, but this was a foot on the gas situation for those first 36 minutes. And, honestly, the whole starting lineup, Dargan, I thought was impressive. All 5 of them, I thought, played. They came to the postseason ready to play, including the one that had a little bit of a question mark coming in.
Yeah, Hannah Stuelke was very much questionable after the elbow injury that she suffered against Illinois. I myself, having recently suffered an elbow injury, was very stunned that she came back in that game and was able to be productive. And so, it was kind of some back and forth leading up to this one. How questionable was she? How ready would she go? How much would adrenaline and kind of her career coming to an end be a factor. And it seemed like all that was positive. Hannah talked, you know, at length for Hannah's standards after the game about her injury, and it's been a tough, week for her. She's, to get adversity like this thrown in at a pivotal point in the final kind of twilight of your career. That's been a really productive career. Is a tough thing. Now she said that there was no way that she was going to miss this game. I think the Iowa training staff might disagree with that. Jan Jensen might disagree with that, but it looked like Hannah has, at least figured out how to play with this injury that is, inevitably going to probably linger to some extent for the rest of this season. And so, for her to come out and really have a productive game, she said that there's, I guess, some issues with her ability to kind of stretch her arm and straighten it. But, I think this was a good way for her to break into the postseason with a game that was not, the most stressful and could kind of feel it out and really settle in with what's her kind of new reality moving forward. So, Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin were in the building. She said that was kind of another little boost for her former teammates. And obviously, Hannah's a big part of this team, a big part of the leadership aspect. We're seeing some sophomore leadership kind of start to bubble to kind of be that next wave of leadership. But, Hannah's got as much experience as anybody with the postseason scene and the Big Ten tournament scene and all that. So I think it was really significant, especially because after this, Iowa's going to have 2 weeks off until its next game, or pretty close to 2 weeks, depending on how the schedule goes. So, for her to get going and have a nice showing, I think was significant. Then you kind of go down the list and so many people who, are in bigger roles down here for the first time were able to find success. Taylor Strimlow's emotional leadership was big. Ava Hayden kind of continuing to be her steady self. Chit Chat, had some solid moments, hit a couple threes. So it was kind of a feel-good game for, pretty much the whole main rotation, from top to bottom. Journey Houston gets a career-high 12 rebounds. Sixth time this year that she's finished as Iowa's leading rebounder, and Iowa's 5-1 in those games. So, I think if you kind of drew up a way for Iowa to maximize this first game and really set the tone for, not just the action down here, but what it hopes is a multi-week postseason run. I think there was a lot of positives to pick from tonight.
Yeah, as you were talking about Hannah Stuelke, and we both talked to her individually, and pretty similar message. I can't remember. You were talking for a little while there, but she woke up sick, like a virus on Thursday.
No, I didn't mention that.
So that kind of added to the gloomy prognosis for Jan Jensen. But when you were talking, though, it made me think of Mark Gronowski a little bit. It's not quite the same, but also kind of like an injury that looked like, oh gosh, that could be pretty bad.
Definitely.
He wasn't able to come back into that Indiana game, but it's a senior in his last ride, and he found a way to come back, and gradually it got better and better. Now, there's not a ton of time here for Hannah, but it's been 8 days, like you said. Tomorrow will be 9 days, and, the first round tournament game will be, 23 days after that initial injury or whatever it is. So, I don't know, just a little parallel to think about. Gronowski ended up, making the most of that senior year. Could have been dicey. He was out there for that Wisconsin game, after that bye week. And here she was after 8 days, after her bye week against Wisconsin up in Madison. Let's look at some other little positives before we talk about picture. Ava Hayden only had to play 17 minutes, 50 seconds.
Big.
And I know I feel like people are starting to gripe, like, why isn't Hayden out there more? But I kind of like the way Jensen has been spelling her. She's so much better when she's fresh, and she's just incredibly efficient when she is fresh. Now, it doesn't mean she can't go 30 plus minutes, but she also was in some foul trouble tonight. But I feel like that she has kind of found the way to mix Hayden in there as much as possible and just get the max out of her and just, let Journey Houston play a lot. And Stuelke played 28. Layla Hayes gave some decent minutes early. That whole group had tough minutes late. But, to me, it just started with I'm just amazed. It seemed like anytime like Iowa gets in a little bit of trouble, it's like, okay, Ava Hayden, just go get a couple buckets. She finished plus 26 in her 1750 today.
Yeah, 18 minutes to score 16 points is about as, that's about as textbook efficiency as you can find there. And I think the emergence of Journey has allowed some more flexibility with how much they do give Ava. And again, I think that's kind of indicative of the center forward, in general, is that sometimes they do kind of need more breathers. They're obviously bigger, taller, and have more on their plate. So, I think being able to, especially if you're gonna, in theory, try to play 3 games in 3 days down here, I think that getting her some breathers and not having it burn Iowa, because she's out. Iowa's ability to still thrive with her on the bench kind of shows how this team has gotten to the point that it's gotten. And it is, as much as Jan has found her cliches for the season, passing the baton is definitely at the top of the list, and Iowa's done a great job of doing that. Um, you know, this game and throughout the whole season. So I think that's a big reason why they're in this position, 25-5, with a lot of different contributors, and you feel like anybody can kind of lead the way any given night. And so, Ava Hayden going for 16 points in 18 minutes, you know, it wasn't 30 points or anything like that, but that's exactly kind of the point, is that they don't need her to go for 30, 25, 30 every single night to be in a spot to not only win, but really control the game and dominate like that.
So let's just talk quick about the finish.
Yeah.
Did Jan pull her starters too soon? I mean, she probably pulled them. If she went one possession more, it probably
Yeah.
was too soon. Now Illinois cut it to 6 with the last 3, so it was 9 until whatever 20 some seconds remained,
Hmm.
if that maybe. But so it was never in jeopardy, but it was kind of I don't know. I mean, there was a little
Significant to
bit of
some.
yeah, significant to some. There was definitely some kind of so it was 12 seconds. So they scored with 32 seconds left and then 12. So it was still 11 points with 33 seconds left. So it's not like this game was total danger. But Shauna Green was pressing with all 5 starters against Iowa's reserves, 5 reserves, 3 freshmen plus Mullaney and Levine. So not exactly your star lineup out there. That said, they could have handled it a lot better. I don't know. I guess it's not. It really isn't a story, but it's just like something that people were talking about. So, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, and it could have even been as simply as on a tough night, Illinois was looking for one more little confidence boost into, they're obviously not going to play for 2 more weeks until the NCAA tournament. So, them being able to I guess find a mild silver lining in a game where they largely trailed by 15 to 20 points for the whole second half might have been the reason why that she kept the starters in. And I thought one thing that kind of emphasized that is even after they cut it to 6 and there was, I don't know how many seconds left. Shauna Green, even after that shot went home, she very clearly waved everybody off, and it wasn't like they were going to foul and all that down to the end. So, I think yeah, I think they could have gone a tad longer. 4 minutes left in the game to pull the starters, even up 21 is maybe a little too much time on the clock still. But at the same time, I think she would have hoped that that unit would have been a little cleaner in getting it to the finish line. And so, even though, those are, there was reserves in all the way across the board down the stretch. I think for the most part, it's kind of, like you said, a non-story that makes the score look a little better for Illinois, and maybe Illinois feels a tad better about the night. But I
Yeah,
don't think it really diminishes what Iowa did in really dominating for the first
right.
36 minutes of the game. And Illinois never really had a serious push. before that, it's not like I think Iowa largely did what it wanted to do, even though the end maybe could have been a little cleaner for sure.
All right, let's talk about big picture now
Hmm.
as we wrap up. And NCAA tournament wise, number 5 overall seed Vanderbilt lost today.
Yep.
Number 6 overall seed is Iowa. Could the Hawkeyes inch up another notch? Now I know in the pre-seeds they were still matched up with the number 4 1 seed, but still, this win to me cements them as a 2 seed. I mean, they're going up against Michigan, who's another 2 seed tomorrow. I just don't see how the committee can drop you from 6 to 9 by losing to 8, which is Michigan in the overall seeding, especially when Vanderbilt ahead of you lost. So you've got this upward mobility now. Now LSU could jump Iowa; they're 7 right now. But anyway, do we feel comfortable saying Iowa has clinched a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament? What's your percentage on that?
99.9,
Okay.
I would say.
I don't know if I go that high, just because people do stupid things, but yeah,
I mean,
98. Yeah,
they picked up another quad
Quad one win, yeah.
tonight. So I think they're 8-6 now in those. Obviously, tomorrow if they lose tomorrow, that's going to be nothing as far as something negative on the resume. Well, I guess 8-5 because they're 25-5. So all their losses are quad one losses, and they have
Right.
plenty of
25-5, Dargan. 25-5.
It sounds kind of absurd to say over and over again, but that's where they are. And if you had told me at the beginning of the season, what does a successful season up to Selection Sunday look like, I would have said hosting. I think that was what felt like to me kind of the ceiling of
Yes, it was.
everything
That was
up
what we
to
talked about. Yeah,
yeah,
host. Can you get a hosting seed? That was kind of
right.
like, I don't know, but maybe if everything
Yeah.
goes right. But here they
So
are as a
now,
2.
right, and so now it's they've cleared that discussion. They've gotten off the 4 line solidly, which would have been matched up with a 1 seed. They've already played 2 of the 1 seeds this year, and it didn't go so well. So that was significant. Now you're in a position where you can really position yourself as best as possible to not just get out of Carver, but keep this thing going into the second weekend and stay in that second weekend for a couple of games. And so obviously, there's a long way to go before all that gets sorted out. But yes, I think Iowa has a 2 seed locked up. I even felt confident that if they had lost tonight, they probably still would have hung on to a 2 seed. But they don't have to deal with that now, and they can focus on Michigan. And it is pretty crazy that as much as post Caitlin Clark seems different. I mean, her sophomore and junior year also ended with 2 seeds, and the Megan Gustafson senior year was also a 2 seed. And so suddenly, even at times this year, if it felt like they haven't been dominating the way that you think a 2 seed would, within a game or so, here they are at the end of the year with a resume that's pretty hard to beat and doesn't really have any holes in it at all. So I think it's a testament to what this team has done and dealing with adversity throughout the year and really responding from it. And
Yeah.
it's going to be a pretty positive Selection Sunday for sure.
Yeah, talking a lot of adversity. This Hannah thing's the latest
Yeah.
of it. I mean, we saw Taylor McCabe in there with the brace on. And didn't get anything out of Emily Rodriguez. They've come together and they look. I mean, like those first 36 minutes. I mean, I wouldn't say it's as good as they've looked all year, but they look like they're primed for the postseason. They look like they're fresh. So, one last point on the 2 seed that I wanted to make is just like getting the 2 seed in women's is like you get a 15 in the first game. That's a breather. Okay,
Right.
You're basically into the round of 32. So. That's a nice thing you earned. It wasn't the case last year as a 6. Now Iowa did win convincingly against Murray State, but that was a 9-point spread. I mean, it wasn't a sure thing going into that game. But anyway, it just it helps. It helps being a 2, and you don't want to be the last 2. So there's a little bit on the line tomorrow. But let's talk about this Michigan game. The Oregon press conference is going on now. It just won't end. I don't know why there's so many questions about Oregon, but there is. The mean, obviously Iowa beat Michigan last time, 62-44. Randy Henderson has the scout. Iowa's defense had 9 kills in that game, which is 3 consecutive stops. They matched that tonight, season high 9 kills against Illinois. So their defensive performance, in their last 2 really big games, has been really on point. And so, what do can Iowa do that again against a Michigan team that a lot of AP voters are still voting ahead of the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like of all the big time home performances that Iowa delivered this year, the Michigan one feels like it was the most influenced by it being at home. Obviously Iowa came right out of the gates and had Michigan rattled and all over the place, and Michigan never really settled into that game. So I think it's going to be, I would not pay attention to the 18-point margin of victory that Iowa had in the first matchup, even though it was not too long ago. So I think Iowa's going to get, a much tougher effort, and I think there's going to be, I just think it's going to be a harder game to kind of to tackle than it was in Carver. Not that they don't know that, because obviously, this isn't Carver and they know how special they play at home. And so I think it's going to be a great test. If this does end up being Iowa's last game before the NCAA tournament, I think that's, not a bad thing, because you're going to get, a team that's probably going to end up with a 2 seed as well. So I think there's stuff to gain from this game, even if it ends in a loss. But yeah, I think of all the double back opportunities that can happen in the Big Ten in the conference tournament, this one to me feels like has the least likely chance to resemble what the first one was. And so I would expect Iowa to be pretty much in a dogfight from the very beginning.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough game. What's your spread prediction?
Ooh, that's a good call.
I've got one in my head, but I'll let you go first.
I'm gonna say Iowa -2.5.
You think Iowa will be favored? I was gonna say Michigan by 4.5. Interesting. We're off it on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you follow women's basketball gambling, which I don't know how many out there do, but Vegas has some peculiar decisions, and I think that they're going to look at Iowa being the higher seed.
Little public team. Public team.
Yeah, and I think they're going to put too much stock in that first matchup and see that Iowa won that one big.
Okay.
And
wow.
So, I don't know.
That'll be
Maybe
interesting.
I'm wrong. Guess we'll
No, I know, but that's what's fascinating about it. We're usually pretty close on predicting the line, but I'm going to say Michigan's favored in this one. And I do think it's probably I think Michigan probably is the favorite in this one, honestly. But
I would say that too.
It just made me, just thinking about the NCAA seeding though, just one more time. Like, I guess it could be a pretty big game for that, because, I mean, you don't want to be. I don't know if they'd match them up with UConn since they played them this year, but that's way at the top of the bracket, so they could.
Right.
So if you drop to the bottom 2 seed, if Michigan wins this, did they jump Iowa for seeding? Does LSU jump over Iowa if LSU makes a run? I mean, they just demolished Baranchek today. Now Vanderbilt did lose, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that 2 seed line. But anyway, so there is something to play for here, because I don't think you just don't want. If you want a prayer to make it to the Final Four, let's be honest, that's a long ways off here, but you just don't want UConn in your bracket, because they're not going to get beat. Whereas maybe if it's Texas at the top, maybe they get beat along the way, and maybe it opens up like it did Caitlin's junior year.
And I also think that, I don't know if this is officially written anywhere, but I kind of feel like they're going to try to avoid putting Iowa or Michigan with UCLA. Having those 1 and 2s be from the same conference in the same bracket. So if that's the case, then that even more so increases the chance that one of Iowa or Michigan is going to get stuck with UConn. And so, I think you could be right.
Okay.
This may be the loser might get UConn. That might be what's on the table tomorrow. And if you look at it that way, that's actually a lot at
That's
stake.
a lot at stake, yeah. Now I know that you got to make it to the Elite Eight to get that point,
Sure.
but still.
Right, and it is interesting, because if you go back to the those final four seasons, particularly the first one, I remember, they were playing Maryland in the semifinals, and that was another game where it was like, okay, both these teams are solidly twos. They're both trending upward. What is really at stake here? And Maryland lost that game, and Maryland got sent with South Carolina, which was essentially, until Iowa beat them, what UConn looks like this year. And so, I think it was significant for that Final Four run to materialize that they got out of South Carolina's bracket. Now, who knows? Maybe they beat them if they play them in the Elite Eight. That's too many hypotheticals right now. But Maryland got smacked by South Carolina in the Elite Eight, and I'm pretty sure they were ahead of Iowa going into that semifinal game. So little things like
really good. That's a great pull. Yeah, I remember that.
So just, even though it seems like that there's not anything huge at stake, it can be little things like that. And when you get to this level of the seeding, you're looking for little advantages like that. And, that could be one that materializes the loser getting UConn from tomorrow's game.
All right, good analysis, Dargan. We're going to pack up. We made it through, no outbursts. I think the rest of the night's going to be just fine. It's fine. Thanks for joining us, everyone out there. Really appreciate it. Fun game, fun season to cover. Really been a fun season to cover, and I think 3:30 tomorrow on BTN, 3:30 Central, 3:30 Central. So and it's the other semi, as you guys probably know, UCLA, Ohio State. So probably UCLA, but McGuff made it to the semis here. So,
Ohio State's playing well down here for sure.
They are. All right, well, Chad Leistikow, Dargan, Southard. I don't even know if I introduced you. I'm really sorry if I didn't. It was kind of a chaotic intro. I don't even know if I introduced myself, to be honest. Anyway, we'll let you guys go. It's late. Talk to you later.